Okay, good morning, class. Now, what we are going to talk today is about the startup companies and what challenges do they face and how they can be successful. So we're going to talk more about it. Okay, so we start with a startup business, what it exactly talks about. Now, startup business, when we say it's any company which is started by an entrepreneur, why? For the main purpose to develop effectively and to validate a particular business model which they have designed. Now, how is it different? When we talk entrepreneurship, it refers to all new businesses, including self-employment and businesses that never intend to get registered. But startups, these are new businesses that intend to grow beyond the sole founder, that it intends to become a corporate house. Okay, and they face high degree of uncertainty. There's always a possibility of high rate of failure, but there are a small amount of them minority who do go on to be successful and very influential, right? So right, some of these startups become unicorns, say privately held startup companies valuing over 1 billion US dollars, right? It can happen. Now, startup actions. Now, what happens? Startups, we know it starts when it becomes starts operating. It start usually by one founder or sometimes co-founders who have a way to solve a problem, right? And how do they go about? They start with market validation by problem interview, solution interview, and then they start building a viable product, that is a prototype to which would help to develop and validate their business model. So they first do a market survey, and they try to find a solution, and then they try to come up build a product and a prototype, and then they do that validation, right? Validate pilot survey to see whether it can be successful. It can be successful, the business plan can be successful or not. And startups process can take a long period of time, right? And hence what is the important is sustaining effort is required. Sustaining effort over the long term is especially challenging. Why? Because of in startups there's always a high degree of failure rates is there possibility, and there are uncertainty outcomes. Okay, next comes up is designing principles. Now, the models behind startup presenting as ventures, they are usually associated with design science. What is design science? It uses design principles, which are considered to be a set of normative ideas and propositions for designing and constructing the backbone of the company. Okay, so for example, like one of the initial design principles is to effectuate for to see whether the loss that can come up, okay, whether that can be affordable or not. So it's always better to make a must have for a small number of users, right, than a nice to have for my large number of users. So start with a small group and then go into a bigger group, right? Bigger group of, when we say group, we are talking of customers. Okay, heuristics and biases in startup actions. Because of lack of information, high uncertainty, need to make decisions quickly. So what happens? Founders of startups use a lot of heuristics and exhibit a lot of biases when they come up with their startup actions. And the heuristics and biases, they are part of the cognitive toolbox, which is used for decision making process, and it also helps to take a decision in a faster way, as quick as possible, in under uncertainty. And but sometimes there can be error, there can be some faulty decisions coming up. And entrepreneurs in this case, they're often not only overconfident about their startups, but also they have their personal influence on an outcome, right? So they get biased, and they tend to believe that they have more power, more degree of control over the events, right? So it comes up. Now, startups usually use a number of action principles. Then we talk of lean startup, to generate evidence as quickly as possible. Why? to ensure to reduce the downside effect of the decision biases, right? So some of the important decision biases that for an entrepreneur in a startup business can be: one is overconfidence, right? When you tend to think, you're more confident, your certainty, degree of certainty is quite higher than what is the actual objective accuracy. Illusion of control, you start over emphasizing on how much skills uh, instead of chance improve performance. Like you talk of how much skills you have instead of improving upon it. Third comes up is the law of small numbers, where it reach conclusion, where the entrepreneurs reach conclusion over a large population using a small sample. Okay. Next is the availability bias, where they make judgments about the probability of events, sorry, based on how easy it is to think of examples, right? And the next one is escalation of commitment, where they persist unduly with unsuccessful initiatives or courses of action. Now, let's go a little more on these startup principles. First is lean startup. Lean startup, what is it? It's a popular set of principles which is used to create and design startups where there are limited resources and there is the degree of uncertainty is quite high when they for building their ventures, which needs to be more flexible and where the cost should be less, right? It's based on the idea that entrepreneurs can make their own implicit assumptions about how their venture would work. It works explicitly in an explicit manner, and then they test it empirically, right? So it's basically a set of principles for entrepreneurial learning and business design model, which is aimed for learning, experimental learning under uncertainty in an engaged empirical manner. You learn, right? So lean startups focuses on a few principles, lean principles. These are the principles where to find a problem worth solving, then define a solution, engage early adopters to market validation, to continually test with smaller, faster iterations, build a function, measure customer response, and verify or refute the idea. Evidence-based decisions on when to pivot by changing your plan's actions and maximize the efforts for speed, learning, and focus. Right. Next is market validation. Right. That's the second principle, where you need to validate the market need before providing a customer-centric product or service. Right. So in order to avoid business ideas with weak demand. Now it can be done. How is the validation done? Through surveys, polling, emails, word of mouth, right? All sample research. Okay. Third principle is design thinking, which is used to understand the customer's need in an engaged manner, right? Now, design thinking and customer development can be biased. Why? Because they do not remove the risk of biasness, because the same biases will manifest itself in the sources of information, the type of information, and the interpretation. So, encouraging people to consider the opposite of whatever the decisions they are about to make tends to reduce the bias, right? That is overconfidence or the hindsight bias anchoring. The fourth principle is decision making under uncertainty, right? So many decisions in startups are made under uncertainty, and so it's one of the key principle is to be agile and flexible, right? So that needs to be there so that it becomes you can change your decisions in you can be flexible and can change it in future. And uncertainty vary within person, right? But entrepreneurs who can perceive more uncertainties than others do not identify more opportunity than others do, right? Next comes up is partnering. So startups can also be formed through partnerships with other firms which would help them to enable their business model to operate and to become attractive to other businesses. Startups needs to align their internal features such as management style. We talk of products, within the market situation. Now, which new startups which can align themselves to one of these profiles, right? They are able to be more attractive to a business partner who are more flexible, who can align. So, and if you can find a business partner, your startup businesses can be successful. Next is entrepreneurial learning. Now, startups need to learn at a huge speed before running out of resources, right? So, proactive actions helps the founders learning to start a business, right? To be more effective, founders often formulate some falsifiable hypothesis, build a minimum viable product, and conduct meeting, right? Next, business design, business model design. Now, with the key learnings about the market validation, design thinking, and lean startup, founders can design a business model. But it's important not to go dive into the business models very early before there is sufficient learning on market validation. You need to have a market validation before you can go in with this. So, what is a startup? So, a little more in details. Startup, as we said, it refers to a company in the first stage of operation, right? It's found by one or more entrepreneurs, and where its star generally has high cost, limited revenue, which is why they look for capital. Okay, and they usually the business gets off the ground. Until the business gets off the ground, startup is often financed by its founders, right? And the startup attracts outside investment until until it gets in. So it's financed by the founders, right? So startups are, as we said, are companies or ventures that are focused around a single product or a service that the founders want to bring in the market, right? And these companies generally do not have a full developed business model, and most importantly, they lack adequate capital to move ahead to the next phase of the business. So initially, as I said, it's funded by the founders, and sometimes they can use seed capital to invest in their research and develop their business plans. So, you see that many startups fail within the initial first years, right? That's why the initial few years. That's why the initial period is very important. So entrepreneurs need to have money, create a business model and business plan, hire a key person, work out intrinsic details, uh, and also plan for the long run, right? Then only can you be successful. So we have some successful startups like we know Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, right? Initial years are very difficult, and that's why it's important. Now, special considerations of the startups. One is the location, right? It's very important to decide whether the businesses should be online, operate from home office or store. So it matters, and it depends on the product or service to be offered. Second comes up is the legal structure. So the startups need to consider what legal structure best fits their entity, right? And sole proprietorship is best for a founder is who's also the key employee of the business. So it's always best. Partnerships are a viable legal structure for business, which consists of several people, right? And they are also fairly straightforward to establish, so it can be done. Sometimes you can have personal liability can be reduced by registering a startup as a limited liability company. You can do that. Next comes up is funding. So startups often raise funds by turning to families and friends or by using venture capitalists, right? So this is basically a group of professional investors that specialize in funding startups. Right. Crowdfunding funding is also one good way of to get access to funds. Now, startups may use credit to commerce their operations. Right. It can happen. Sometimes they can other companies choose small business loans to help fuel growth. Next comes up is incubator firm. So what is incubator firm? It's an organization which is engaged in the business of fostering early stage companies through the different development phases until the companies have sufficient finance, human and physical resources to function on their own. So incubator firms are organizations which helps these small businesses in their early stages, so until they are self-sufficient, they can do it. An incubator firm helps a startup from an early stage idea to a company that can stand on its own. That's what I just said. So they provide services like office space, administration, education, mentorship. So it can happen, and they either charge a fee for their service or take an equal stake in the startup. So it can incubate a firm can either be a non-profit or a for-profit entity, and it provides assistance. How, as I said earlier, through finance, through business consultants providing consultancy, uh, providing physical location, and also to information access to information and research resources, right? So it's very important to note that incubators are different from accelerators. How is incubator different from accelerator? Both, though both have the same similar characteristics, each function in a different way. Now incubator, they focus on companies that are just starting to develop their idea in a business. Accelerators take startups with an established business model and accelerate their time to market. Okay, so incubators are helping a company startups to to develop their idea. Accelerators, they concentrate on those startups who already have an established business model and help them to accelerate their time to market. Okay, next comes up is market changes, where we talk of competition and first mover advantage. Right? Now, change is the only constant thing in competitive markets. It happens, it's going on, and those who are able to cope with it can survive effectively. And understanding the concept of change in market, that's why it's very important for any business, especially for a new entrant or startup, that how well these changes are handled. So change is what? Change concept, it's a general notion or approach to change that has been found to be very useful in developing specific ideas for change, right? And when you creatively combining all these change concepts with knowledge but specific subjects can help to generate ideas for tests of change. Now, change can be a disruptive change. Disruptive change is a non-localized future which is irreversible change that affects a portion of the industry, and these are caused by changes in market trends, causing a shift in areas like the mode of production to fit the customer demands. Plan change is the process of preparing the entire organization or a part of it for new goals or new directions. Incremental change refers to efficiency and sustainability improvement in a company's process, operations, all the other things, which is related to the existing business model. And transformational change is defined as a second order frame breaking change that completely alters the present, the operating structure. Okay, so meeting the challenge, disruptive change has never been any easy. It's not very easy, especially for the management of big companies, right? Market needs are changing continuously, and businesses have to adapt to this change, climatic change. This change in the climatic change here means this change we're talking of the business environment. Okay, so disruptive innovation, what is it? We are talking of a technology whose application significantly affects the way a market operates or industry operates. Example could be the internet, coming up of the internet, which has changed drastically. So disruptive change, more into details. So it's basically a non-localized future, irreversible change that affects a portion of the industry, which is caused by the changes in the market trends, resulting in a shift in the mode of production to fit the customer demands, right? Say we have mobile phones coming up, as compared to the regular the landlines that we have. Okay, so this is an example. It's more on the mobile phones that we have spoken about, right? So what we basically talk of that in case of uh, disruptive changes suffer from an initial low performance from the mainstream market, right? Uh, so what happens is, despite all this, it still prospers in a given market. Niche is a new opportunity because of new performances that it brings. The performance parameters are greatly improved, so the traditional method is generally displaced here. Now, how do we recognize the disruptive change? Disruptive change, how do we do? Like the areas are constantly undergoing disruptive change that undergoes is in the telecommunication, computers. These are the areas which is going on where we are going to a digital era, and invention of new products coming up. Other areas is educational sector, retail, pharmaceutical, and so on and so forth. So, how do you realize that you are about to face a disruptive change? The indicators can show early and allow time for managers or business to prepare in order to deal with the change, but sometimes may not be seen until the last moment when there's almost no time for transition. Okay, so some of the indicators, general indicators are, as we see, is availability of affordable products, convenient services, widespread customer dissatisfaction, change in accessibility of customers, vendors, consolidation within a given industry, specialities becoming commodities, customers not being are being oversold, public sentiments, change in government policies, right? So these are some of the things, change indicators. Okay, how to respond to disruptive change? Now, many businesses are actually swallowed and never be able to see again, while others emerge successfully, right? So what happens? These come up as a result of the way people respond to this disruptive change, right? So if you deny that disruption and do nothing about it, then you will be totally wiped out, whereas those who are able to recognize the change and accordingly act according to it would be able to survive, right? So, what are the factors that affect responsiveness to disruptive change? One is the resources. The amount of resource that a company has will determine how and what the company can do. Right? It could be resources, could be anything, not just financial, but non-monetary resources also. Second is values. Now, the value of company that affect its decision-making process, like what to do, what not to do when changes are coming up, right? Third comes up is the process. So the nature of process that any business uses will also determine how best it is able to deal with the disruptive change. The process of disruptive change. Dealing with disruptive change is a process that needs to be done in the right way, right? And it starts with identifying the nature of challenge. After accepting the challenge, there should be passion and aspiration to deal with it. How would you deal with it? So knowing about the future holds comes from a good analysis of how can you deal. When you have a good analysis of the market and the enterprise as a whole, also by exploring the possibilities, right? That could be another way. After that, then what happens is mobilize the commitment of all the members and be prepared to implement the changes that are required, right? And so with this change is it's continuous, it's going on, so it's very clear that disruptive change is inevitable everywhere. So for the success of every business, management should ensure that they're able to identify the disruptive change indicators as early as possible and be ready to deal with it. And also what we have is the changes in technology that we have. Changes of technology that's going on at a very fast pace, and business have to run smoothly. In order to run smoothly, they should be able to cope with the needs of the customers. Plan change. Plan change is, as we said, the process of preparing the entire organization or a part of it for the new goals and or a new direction, which could be with regards to culture, internal structure, process. Okay. Now, there are both internal and external factors which affect the changes. External factors, when we say it talks of globalization, workforce diversity, ethics, technology. Internal talks of poor performance, internal crisis, change in workers' expectation, right? So factors which influences change in strategic management may be internal or as well as external. Like so, one has to identify. It could be with regards to management, structural change, competition, socioeconomic factors, laws, technology, change and change management. Right. What is this? Change is moving to a future state. Change management is supporting individual employees who are impacted by the change during their transition from current to future state. Okay. So as we see, these are the forces, driving forces of change. Right. We have it up here for you. Right. So planned change occurs when deliberate decisions are made in the organization. Unplanned change occurs due to unforeseen changes. Right. So both external and internal factors can result in planned as well as unplanned changes. So these are the steps of planned change. Recognize the need, then develop the goals, then select the change agent, diagnose the current climate, select implementation method, develop a plan, implement it, follow the plan and evaluate it. So the four kinds of plan change that we have is one is mission changes, right? When you want to change the existing mission, right? Say example coming up with Instagram that they did it. Strategic changes, it comes with there is a change of how company tackles a problem. Operational changes is where we talk of changing the structure of the company. Technological changes where we talk of new technologies coming into play. Okay, next, incremental change. Incremental change is a small adjustment made towards an end result, right? In a business, when we make an incremental change, it's a change in what that things that are done to change, making an incremental change to the way that things are done typically does not significantly threaten the existing structures and other or alter the current methods. So you just a minor change, right, towards a better result, right? So in the many, what happens is in the service field, most of the service field operations, they concentrate on incremental behavior change, where focusing on adapting one's behavior to fit a particular system, right? And like so they can also sometimes they go into a little into the character change. When we talk of transformational change also comes up. Now, as I said, incremental change is a process to adjust the present status through minor changes, whereas in radical change the gap between the two, current and the future state, is quite great. Okay. So what's the importance of incremental change? Most change in the business is incremental, which is small change for improvements, building upon the existing state, making minor change to develop, right? Okay. Transformational change, it's defined as a second order, as I said, frame breaking change that completely alters your current operating structure, which brings about massive change in the process, people, and most importantly, the technology. And once this measure steps are taken, you can't change your mind and go back to the old ways. You will have to do it. Shift in the business culture resulting from a change of the strategy and process that the organization has used. Okay, disruptive innovation. Next, what is disruptive innovation? It refers to a technology whose application significantly affects the way a market or industry functions, right? And as I said, example is that of internet. Okay. Next topic is resistance from customers for change. Customers do have a tendency to change, resist change, any change that is coming up, right? So it's quite natural, right? Why it's a resistance to change is the action that is taken by individuals and groups when they feel that a change that is occurring may be a threat to them, right? They feel that it's a threat, may not be real, or may not be actually that real, or they're just perceiving it. And such resistance from customers could be overcome. How? Through understanding the basic types in context to innovation adoption. So you need to understand it. What are the different categories of innovation adopters? There are five categories that we have. One is innovators, technology enthusiasts who appreciate technology or new ideas, right? Or willing to develop makeshift solutions. Next comes up is early adopters who adopt. These are visionaries who are looking to adopt and use new technology to achieve revolutionary changes, who are attracted by high risk, high reward projects and not price sensitives, and demand personalized solutions. We're willing to take quick response. Okay. Third type is early majority. Well, early majority is where who are looking for a evolutionary change to make gain productivity improvements, who are averse to disruptions in operations. They want applications which are proved, and they need proof. Okay, say they seek a reference from trusted sources. They don't value technology for its own sake, but for productivity enhancement. Want to reduce risk, so they will move as a crowd and look to the market leaders how they're going about it, and they make a swift transition. Late majority is when we talk of conservatives who are risk averse and technology shy, who are demand pre-assemble, who are motivated to adopt new innovations to maintain parity with their competition, and often rely on a single trusted source. Okay. And next is laggards. Laggards are those who are very skeptic regarding, they want to maintain their present status. They are reluctant to believe that new innovations can improve productivity. So they will actually block all new innovations that's coming up. So, first mover advantage. First mover, who's a first mover? First mover is a company that aims to gain an advantageous and perhaps a huge amount of market position by being the first to establish itself in the market. Okay, so it's always beneficial that if you're the first one to launch a new product in the market, you have a high chance of success, right? So the advantages and disadvantages of first mover. Now, first mover advantage, it allows a company to establish a strong brand recognition and product service loyalty before their entrance, right? It's there. And it refers not only to a large company that moves into a market. It basically refers to a large company that moves into a market. First mover advantage, like you can develop yourself, right? So Amazon is the example. And disadvantages is basically they have to bear the economic burden of developing a new market that followers in the market can exploit, right? So followers in the market can learn from the mistakes of the first movers, which would allow them to reduce the risk and avoid making costly mistakes. So advantages, more into detail when we talk of it. One comes up is definitely the brand name recognition. As I said, you're the first per mover. So what happens? You develop the loyalty amongst your customers, and they get to know about the new products and new customers coming up, and you can create your brand image, right? Economies of scale, right? Especially in case of manufacturing technology based products, right? So what happens, they have a longer learning curve, which enables them to establish a more cost effective means of producing or delivering a product, right? Switching costs. Switching cost, when we say switching cost is what, it's also a very important thing. So once a customer has purchased the first mover's product, switching to a rival product may be cost prohibitive. For example, a company using Windows operating system would not likely would not change to another operating system, right? Because of the costs. So disadvantages or additional risk of first mover. Now, it costs, what is there? For example, it's cost approximately 60 to 75% less to replicate a product than when you start first creating it, right? And what happens is if the market responds in an unfavorable manner, so later entrants will capitalize on the first movers' failure and accordingly align their product with the customer's needs. So it can, but first movers, there is no guarantee that it will be successful, right? And they have to invest heavily in persuading customers to try new products, which the later entrants do not have to do that. They can avoid the mistakes made by the first mover. And if the first movers are unable to capture the markets, consumers with their products, later entrants can take advantage of it. They can also reverse re-engineering new products and make better or cheaper products as compared to first movers. Later entrants can identify new areas of improvement, which is left by a first mover, and take advantage. Okay, so examples of successful companies that were not first movers. So Google, we have Southwest Airlines, Starbucks. These were not first movers, but they have been successful. Okay, Netflix. In case of Netflix, Netflix is a first mover, right? And but it has been successful, right? So this is what we have. So what happens when there is a new entrant coming up? How is it? How does it impact? A high threat of new entrants can make an industry more competitive, decrease profit for the existing competitors. Whereas if there's a low threat of entry, what happens? Less competitive and increases more profit for the existing firms, right? So new entrants are deterred by barriers to entry. So there are barriers to entry. So, and threat of new entrants, this is one of the Porter's 5 forces industry analysis framework, where we said that new competitors pose a threat to the current players, right? Which also helps in shaping the degree of competitiveness, right? It helps in determining the attractiveness of the industry, right? Okay. So new entrants, they have a significant influence on the ability of current companies to generate a profit. Right. So when new competitors come up, they come up with some, say they're coming up with the same products or services, company's competitive position will be at risk, right? So threat of new entrants, it refers to the ability of which new companies can enter into a market. So that's why the barriers, we have some barriers to entry where the existing firms try to prevent new firms to come in. So what are the different types of barriers to entry? One is the brand loyalty, which comes up. Cost advantages, where companies can produce easily, existing companies can produce easily and offer the products at a lower cost. Government regulations are there. Capital requirement, huge capital is needed to start a business. Access to suppliers and distribution channels. Existing companies are in a better position where we talk of this. Retaliation, existing companies can collude and deter new entrants. Okay, so the threat of new entrants actually depends on the barriers to entry. Barrier refers to the existence of high cost or obstacles that can prevent or deter new competitors from entering. So high threat of new entrants comes up because of these situations. And when we have low threat of entry, that's when you have this, right? So high barriers to entry means low threat of new entrants, so which means increased profit potential, whereas low barriers to entry means high threat of new entrants and reduced profit potential. So how new entrants affect business? How does it happen? Like when a new company enters the business, there are the variables that influence the performance of the business change, and you have to react to maintain your position. So what are the barriers? Typical barriers to entry could be cost of setting up the business, customer loyalty. This could be some of them, right? How the company enters the market will tell you what its strengths are. Okay, cost is the other thing, right? When a new buyer enters the market, suppliers often raise prices because of high demand, and the new entrants would need the same materials, and but they have to pay at a higher cost, right? So if your suppliers raise prices, you can reduce inventory and seek substitutes for the most expensive items. Prices is the another threat. Okay, so when the entry of new competitor tends to reduce the market prices, that happens. So if you have higher cost, you must compete on non-price factors such as quality, special features, or customer service to survive in that competition. If you're a new competitor, okay, competitors, right? How the new entrant chooses to compete is a key factor in how the entry affects your business, right? So it makes a lot of difference. Okay, so these are the examples that we have. Example of JetBlue, right? How they have been operating, and how do the competitors respond? It can be either direct or indirect, right? So only difference is that when we talk of direct competitors, they offer the same or a very similar solution to customer. Indirect competitors offers a solution to the same problem but in a different category. So Ola is a direct competitor to Uber. Public transportation is an indirect competitor, right? So wise thing to do when analyzing competition is to figure out who the main competitors are. So as an investor, you should know who your competitors are, which gives you a better idea of who the startup is competing with and what their chances of success is, right? So to begin your analysis, you should try to find out the companies who are offering the same solutions to startup, that is your direct competitors. Which is more relevant to companies operating in existing markets, right? You need to know this, right? What are their advantages, history, market strategy? These are the direct competitors. Then look into the indirect competitors. That what are the alternatives to the solution? What are the benefits of those advantages, and what are people using now to solve their problems, right? So each startup should know their competitors and be aware of what they are doing, which gives them a better position to overview and helps them to make wiser choices in marketing and product development, right? So it's very important. It's very, very important that you have to know this. So the competition checklist, right? What are the checklists that you have? These are the checklists, right? Direct competitors, what are the advantages? What does indirect competition look like? What are the alternative solutions? What makes a startup unique? What response can new entrants make? New entrants, the expected reaction would be of industry incumbents to a new entrant influences the prospect or threat of entry by a new competitor. So there are a number of conditions that indicate the likelihood of retaliation to entry. The history of long retaliation is there, like people retaliate to it. Established firms who have sufficient resources, they can retaliate, right? Established firms with commitment to the industry and high illiquid assets, low industry growth. So these are some of the responses that can happen. Resistance by next topic is resistance by potential customers to change. What are the reasons? Firstly, an innovation can create a high degree of change in the customer's day-to-day existence and disrupt their established routines. That's why they do it. Secondly, an innovation can conflict with the customer's prior belief structure, what their belief was, right? Now it's changing, so they resist. Competing against government controlled industry. So personalize your service. Big corporations may get a lot of things like a brand name and client base, but they often fail at personalization. So one of the important factors. So you need to personalize with your customers, differentiate your offerings, right? What you need to how you can differentiate yourself from the others. That is important, right? It also helps in embracing new business. Differentiating yourself means also embracing your small business status. You can do that. Start freelancing. Not all clients want to work with a big corporation with the price tag that goes along with. So you can consider position yourself as a freelancer or consultant and offer some your clients reasonable but competitive rates. Deliver lightning fast, right? To deliver services at a very quick pace. So because not every client wants to work with biggest agency. They want to yeah, where there are big agencies are quite big, they are quite busy, so they want faster actions, faster results. Crowdsource it, right? So new crowdsourcing rules and regulations have made it very easier for just about anyone to seek funding and ideas from the public. Be seen everywhere, make yourself popular, known to people, right? So it could be through advertisement on television, billboards, right? So sometimes actually you are also uh, you can actually sit with your clients and sit down over a cup of coffee and talk, and so make yourself known, right? Offer a value upsell. Now entrepreneurs tend to sell too much for too little to get their foot on the door, right? So there are well, sometimes that's a necessary but effective tactic. There are other ways you can do it. For say if you're on social media consultant, what happens, you can create a template or training videos about your services and make it known. Okay, so that's all that we have here for you. And if you have any questions, you can always tell me in the next class, right? So otherwise, that's all that we have to